every single thing I tried to do was made overly complicated. Many places are romanticized on social media. It just doesn't reflect the reality. Like all these kinds of things. And I just don't understand why. Before traveling to Japan, I thought of Japanese society as people that really value each other, respect each other. And
Okay, so if you've ever scrolled through YouTube or Instagram or TikTok and had an interest in travel, then you've probably seen it. I'm talking about the neon-lit streets of Tokyo, the spotless, clean streets, the bullet trains, the vending machines that serve hot meals, and a society that runs, or at least seems to run, like clockwork. Japan looks like a digital nomad's dream. But in this episode, we're going to break that illusion. Because behind the filters and the travel vlogs is a country that, while beautiful, fascinating, and so rich in culture, can be surprisingly frustrating for anyone trying to live and work remotely. So today we're going to talk to Jan, who spent some time in Japan as a digital nomad and came away with a very different perspective. He encountered a lot of bureaucracy, social isolation, and a surprising reliance on cash. So we're going to explore why Japan might be one of the worst places to live for a digital nomad. So Jan, when you first got to Japan, how soon did you feel the disconnect between the fantasy of living there and the actual reality? Or did it happen gradually?
Yeah, Johnny, that's a really good question. I believe it happened gradually. So in total, I believe I stayed about 2 months there. And the first few weeks, I definitely enjoyed it. I traveled around quite a bit. I've been to Tokyo, stayed there for a few days. Then I went to Hiroshima, explored that area for a bit, I think about a week, and then went to Osaka, where I stayed for 1.5 months. Initially it was all good, right? But then every day that passed, it's like I started to notice more things I disliked, and it's might sound a bit weird, right? But it's especially if you live there long term. I believe Japan has a few flaws that people should look into, right, before they're deciding to make the move, either as an expat or decide to stay there for a few months as a digital nomad, and make it their base, right?
I want to hear about those flaws, but also I find it interesting how the perception of Japan seems to be warped, at least versus the reality of living there as a nomad or possibly as a migrant. If you look at the Economist, they have this most livable cities ranking. Mm-hmm. And Osaka, I believe, is 7th. And Tokyo for 2025 is, I believe, 13th, which is impressive. I mean, London, my closest capital, is 59th, I believe, and New York is ranked 65th. So Osaka made it to the top 10, and you stayed there for such a long time. So it's strange to think that you had a bad experience living in one of the most livable cities in the world. Is that a lie?
I'd be curious to know about which metrics they exactly looked at and which metrics they evaluated to come up with that conclusion.
They're looking at crime.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking at cost of living. They're looking at population density, pollution, weather.
You know, like the points you just mentioned, they're all good, right? It's a very safe place. Both Osaka and Tokyo are super secure. I believe Osaka is one of the safest cities in the world. The weather, I mean, I can't complain about that. It was pleasant while I was there, about 20 degrees on average every day, and I was in late spring.
But what about pollution?
Pollution seemed okay as well. Relatively clean. Streets are pretty well taken care of. Although it's not as clean as it might have been portrayed on social media in the past. You do see occasional trash. Well, if you see trash bins, they're likely overflowing, just because there aren't any, or they're just maybe in the whole city there are a few. And if you see one, if you encounter one, it's just typically so popular that everyone wants to throw their trash into that. So that's an issue. But aside from that, there's really not that much to complain. It's those factors. In those factors, Osaka performs well, and I believe Tokyo as well. What I personally disliked a lot was that social media portrays Japan as a perfect place, essentially, right? So a lot of people that might do their research before a trip, they think they're coming to paradise, essentially. They have this this idea in their mind that everything works perfect there, that it's futuristic cities, spotless streets, everything is very efficient, everything is super peaceful, everything is respectful as well, and everything is well thought through, which I don't think is always the case. Just as a few examples, efficiency. I think efficiency is one of the main things I struggled with personally. So I tried to sign up for a gym, for example, and it took me literally, 3 to 4 hours probably to get that sorted. I found the gym, I filled out the application before and online. I came there and they tried to tell me, hey, you know what? You can't join because you don't have a seal. So apparently people, they don't sign contracts there. They have a seal, which contains the initials, I assume, and then they use that as a form of signature. I didn't have one, so that was the first issue. We had tried to get that sorted with Google Translate because literally no English was spoken, none whatsoever. We got it sorted out eventually, but it took much longer than I would have expected personally. And that was one of the main issues I faced. Same with trying to get a local SIM card. That took a lot of time. And I believe when I signed up for one of their public transport cards, it was also not as efficient as it could have been. I went to an office, had to fill out an application to get that somehow. Later on, I actually found out that you could have gotten it from one of the ticket machines as well, but I didn't know about it, and there wasn't as much information out there as I would have appreciated. So those things,
I think it's important.
Yeah, those things, Johnny, they really don't affect tourists as much, right? But I believe if you're staying there long term, it's a struggle, and it's not just the activities I just mentioned. While staying there, I had the feeling that every single thing I tried to do was made overly complicated. And hey, as an example, like getting into a bus, right? If you would get into a bus in the Western world, let's say, you go in the front, right? You enter in the front, you purchase a ticket from the driver, you go to the back, and once you reach your stop, you leave through the back door. That's how it's done usually, right? In Japan, it's the opposite way. You enter through the back door, and you leave from the front. And that's something, like all these kinds of things, and I just don't understand why. And I'm sure they might have a reason for it, right? Someone must have thought, hey, this is how it should be done. Let's do it like that. But as someone who has grown up in the Western world, I find it really difficult to get used to these small daily things.
I think it's important to note that this is not necessarily a criticism of the way the Japanese choose to exist. I mean, it's fine to predominantly speak Japanese and not want to speak English because that is your language. And if you want to get on the bus at the back and exit from the front, that's fine. That's your choice. I mean, it's your country. But I think it's important to note that this episode is for people that are considering going to Japan as a digital nomad, and this is what you can expect. And the language difficulties is something that I've heard so much. I mean, my wife spent 18 months there and had to learn Japanese because otherwise there was just no chance of her being able to get by in society. It was going to be too difficult. And I think that's the first thing you should be aware of, is there's going to be a major language barrier. And obviously you experienced that. And I wanted to ask you that immediately. Like, how did you communicate with people? And did that process of signing up for the gym take 3 to 4 hours simply because of the language barrier, Jan, or were there other reasons?
Yeah, I think mainly due to the language barrier. We had to do everything through Google Translate. It was quite a process. In general, I think there might be two situations, right? Touristy places. In touristy places, you can expect people to speak relatively good English. It's typically fine. Then prices are slightly inflated, right? But it's, I guess, the price of convenience, and I'm willing to pay for it personally. And then everything else that was outside this tourist bubble, it was super difficult to communicate with people. And it started with my Airbnb host, who didn't speak a word of English, like none. And he has hosted people on Airbnb for several years. predominantly US travelers, it seemed, like looking at the reviews, that's the impression I got. So it was pretty difficult. Google Translate really helped a lot. But yeah, I'm not used to that personally. And if you travel to other countries in Asia, other touristy countries like Thailand, for example, you do have a different level of English. It's just the case. It's a lot easier to get by than in Japan.
So those touristy places that you visited, was that Tokyo as a whole, or were those suburbs of Tokyo? And was it harder in Osaka, where it's Tokyo is the largest city in the world, and Osaka obviously isn't Tokyo, but it could arguably still be touristy. So what were those touristy places, and what were the places that were?
When I meant touristy places, I had attractions in mind. Tourist attractions.
Oh.
Or famous restaurants. It can happen that you go into one restaurant in Osaka, right? A very famous one, for example. You encounter people that speak perfect English, and then you go maybe to a restaurant opposite the street, same area, and it's the total opposite. You'll not be able to even order anything in English. That can happen, right? It's not the main issue here. Just it was just frustrating. Like everything summed up and everything being difficult.
And difficult to overcome. If you were to give advice to someone who really wants to go over to Japan but doesn't speak Japanese, I mean, you can give them the advice of go learn Japanese and you'll be okay, but that's a lot to ask. Is there any advice that you would have?
Google Translate, that's probably your most important app while you're in Japan, for sure. Aside from that, learn a few words of Japanese, at least basic phrases. Maybe try to learn how to order a check in Japanese, for example, how to ask for waiters' attention, right? There's different senses you would learn. And that works then typically.
With your German accent, could you please share any of these phrases that you learned?
To be honest, I literally forgot most of them. My girlfriend actually studied Japanese in school for a while on university. So she handled those things, and she had a few Japanese phrases still in her book, and she managed perfectly. Saved us a lot of hassle.
I like that the women of our lives are the ones that have handled the Japanese. Like my wife is incredible. I mean, even now she can still speak Japanese and translate. It's unbelievable. And I haven't visited, but I plan on visiting. And I think one of the reasons why I'm really attracted to go is because of her ability to speak Japanese. You're not the first person to tell me that it's difficult to get along there without being able to speak the language, which you can't really criticize.
I don't want to be misunderstood. I still believe Japan is an amazing tourist destination, and one of the reasons why it's so fascinating is that it's entirely different to every other place I've been to in the past. But yeah, living there long term, that comes with some challenges, and that's why we're having this episode here. I still, if someone is thinking about traveling to Japan, I can highly recommend it. A week or two there, well invested time, and I would go again even, but maybe not for long term, or very likely not for a longer period of time.
Yeah. I mean, look, it looks like a beautiful place to visit as a tourist, and it's also, correct me if I'm wrong, but appears to be like a tech forward-thinking powerhouse, so to speak. Like, it's rich with technology. I remember visiting Singapore and being astounded by the cameras, and then being told that they were imported from Japan.
You would think so. I mean, there are a lot of advanced car manufacturers in Japan that are leading in developing electric cars. For example, there is Sony. There are many other super big technological companies, but to be honest, I didn't find it that advanced. At least it didn't feel like it on a daily basis. And I'm someone who has been to South Korea as well, which is really nearby. And the comparison, it's very drastic. And it starts by just with the fact that many things are cash only, right? I'm used to paying by card almost everywhere. In Europe, that's how we do it typically. But in Japan, many restaurant shops or even gyms, you have to bring cash. And the way this works typically is they have little machines in some restaurants, for example, where you then like click on your order and then you enter the bill and then gives you a ticket and you give that ticket to the waiter and they would then serve you your meal. Same with the haircut. It works, right? But it's not technologically advanced. And I think it's charming, right? Don't misunderstand me.
I would never dream to imagine Japan being a very cash-orientated country. I would think possibly Vietnam. I would probably think Thailand, Indonesia, Bali. But Japan? Were you withdrawing money with your Revolut card?
Actually, that's how I would have done it. Typically, I would have probably gone to an ATM, tried to use the card that offers the most affordable cash withdrawals abroad. And currently, I believe that's my Revolut card. My Wise card might also offer good conditions. But in Japan, I actually, remitted myself some money beforehand. So while I was in Thailand, I did some money transfer with a cash pickup, and I literally went to a bank branch and picked up my cash, my Thai baht there, and that was a lot cheaper than withdrawing money from an ATM. And then what I did is I exchanged that into Japanese yen before traveling to Japan, and paid zero fees.
So, wow! So you went to you went in Thailand to get your baht. You picked up Thai baht in cash, and then you exchanged it for yen, and you traveled with that yen over to Japan.
Yeah, exactly, and that literally cost me maybe €1 or €2 in total. For
that's
almost
good.
$1,000 in Japanese yen. I believe that's
The yen.
yeah.
The yen isn't the strongest of currencies, so that must mean carrying quite a lot of notes.
No, not really, to be honest. I think their biggest bill is 10,000, which is about how much is that? Maybe $60-70. I would have to calculate.
Okay, paying for your gym, paying for your haircut, paying for the bus, was that all in cash?
That was all in cash, yeah. One of the biggest expenses was actually recharging the public transport card. Had to be done through cash. They have these machines. You insert the cash, you recharge that card, and then you can use it throughout the whole network. But you have to have cash first, of course.
Wow, I'm quite surprised by that. And I guess that's probably one negative or flaw of Japan that crosses over with tourists as well, because you're probably still going to be shocked by that as a tourist visiting Japan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be shocking. You can get used to it as well, obviously. And that's how things have been. It works, right? Cash has been used in the past very successfully. No one had an issue with it. It's just that now we're so used to digital payments, a lot of people are at least, that it can feel a little bit, weird or maybe even frustrating.
Like at any point were you confused by what was going on around you, and did you have to ask for help, or were you unable to ask for help because no one could speak to you in English?
I asked for help several times, and to be honest, the people I asked, they tried their best to help me. Always. They were always, as helpful as they could have been. Just that the language barrier made things maybe a little bit difficult. But still, they tried to go above and beyond, and found the Japanese people in general very, very helpful and very dedicated to what they do.
That's nice, because that might not necessarily agree with the idea of social isolation and disconnection in Japan. You might think that asking for help in Japan could be one of the worst places because people aren't interested in social interaction.
Yeah,
apparently.
Johnny, I think there might be a difference between asking people that in their professional life and asking people in their personal life. I think in their personal life, a lot of people are more reserved, right? And they would find it maybe maybe a bit weird if they were asked for help or for directions, for example. But if you ask someone who's an attendant on a train station, for example, they have a lot of attendants on a train station. People that have been to Japan, they will know what I mean. Those people that are obviously doing that for a living, they'll be very eager to help, and they'll go above and beyond. Even if they might not know perfect English, they'll tell you, or they make sure you get into the right train. And if they have to personally accompany you inside the train, they'll assure you reach your destination. That's for sure.
Okay, well, that's quite good. From like a utility perspective, that is good. But then you said that there's a disconnect. So can you talk to the social side of Japan, and did you make friends? Did you have interactions with people on a personal level?
Not at all, to be honest, Johnny. I think people in Japan, they're a little bit more reserved in their personal life. One could maybe say shy. I don't know if that's the right word. but it's just a fact. People there, they're not as outgoing as they are in other countries.
I was going to say, do you think having not being able to speak Japanese will massively impact that? I mean, like it would in most countries.
It's for sure a component that makes things even more difficult. But I've heard it also from Japanese people that they have problems making friends, that they might feel a little bit isolated at times. And you see that also within restaurants, for example. In the UK or in the EU, we're used to seeing tables where two people face each other, right? That's kind of unusual in most places in Japan. Even like what's very common is like having a bar, right, with dedicated single seats, because people do a lot of things alone on a daily basis, and that's fine, right? But it's definitely unusual.
It's all fine because it's their
Absolutely.
choice. But I think it has to serve as arguably a red flag. You could say that's not, but a red flag for someone that wants to visit as a digital nomad. The idea of being nomadic is probably quite isolationist as well. But I think for many people, it's actually more about having social interactions and meeting new people. I think a lot of people travel to work remotely to meet people as well. And Japan might not be the best place to do that, at least with your experience. And also, not just at least with your experience, with what I mean, it's pretty clear at this point that Japan seems to have one of the more introverted societies of the world, I think, or a society that does prefer to be alone. And I think it sounds to me, if you're going to visit Japan for a long period of time, then you might begin to feel lonely.
Yeah, I could imagine that. And I would not want to be an expert there.
Are there any daily sort of little gripes or frustrations that you can share?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about bicycles.
Right,
Honestly,
okay.
that's probably my biggest critic point here. Before traveling to Japan, I thought of Japanese society as people that really value each other, respect each other, and try to do their best to not disturb each other in daily life, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Once people sit on a bicycle, it feels like they forget all these social norms, and I don't know, like it might sound abstract to someone that hasn't been there, but I've literally been rammed by bicycles around 5 to 6 times throughout the 2 months that I stayed there. Like, people cycle very fast. Yeah, and they don't cycle on the road. They typically cycle on the walkway as well, which is unusual. In Europe, we're not allowed to do that, and I believe in Japan you aren't either. Ask ChatGPT about it, and there are apparently a lot of bicycle-related lawsuits every year, where people got into accidents and then they're being sued. And I think the Japanese government even recommends some type of insurance if you cycle regularly. Honestly, that's probably the biggest culture shock I experienced there.
In London, for example, we've seen an explosion, people cycling to the point where they're actually overtaking cars. Now there are more people cycling than there are cars on the road. But we do have possibly wide enough roads or a wide enough city where we can put cycle roads in, where we can improve the cycling infrastructure. And I wonder if that's not the case in Tokyo. I wonder if it's so densely populated.
Yes, mentioned before, Johnny, there were cycling paths. Still, people choose to cycle on the walkway. If you try to be as respectful as possible to each other, right, as a society, you shouldn't forget about that when you're on a bicycle.
Are there any other things that you would mention just in terms of like daily gripes?
It's quite busy, especially during cherry blossom season. It's just it's huge. A lot of tourists, and you might not feel that in most parts of big cities, but then there are a few touristy spots, and obviously if you happen to live right nearby, then you'll encounter a lot of tourists, to a point where it's difficult to walk. And I'm thinking about certain streets in Kyoto, around the temple area. It just gets really busy. That's what it is. And I mean, for good reason as well, right? Japan is an amazing tourist destination, very fascinating, culturally rich, as a lot of people want to travel there, obviously. But yeah, that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're living there long term. I recommend trying to stay in areas that are maybe a little bit off the beaten tourist path, more local areas, and there are plenty, and then shouldn't be an issue.
And that comes with its benefits as well, such as it'll be cheaper in terms of the cost of living, I expect.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Housing will likely be a lot cheaper.
Can we talk about anything positive, Jan?
I think we mentioned a few really positive things, right? As a tourist destination, Japan is incredibly fascinating, and I can highly recommend going there at least once in your life. I actually think everyone should have been to Japan at least once, because it's so different, as I mentioned. And for longer stays, I guess it depends what you do. It can be charming as well to some people, I assume, especially people that are very fascinated about the Japanese society, people that are maybe interested in mangas, animes, and all these kind of things. I guess it can be charming staying there long term, but for me, it just wasn't ideal. And that comes from someone who has been to 55 countries and stayed and lived there long term. Or at least for a month or a little bit longer. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a valuable opinion and experience for people that are considering moving. I think a lot of decisions these days are based upon lies. I mean, you make a decision based upon a video that you might see online that could be entirely fabricated.
That's my main issue, Johnny. That's my main issue. Like, that's something I just don't understand. The way that not just Japan, but many countries or many places are romanticized on social media, it just doesn't reflect the reality. And that can be incredibly misleading, in my opinion.
Do you think romanticization sells better than
for sure.
doom content?
For sure. Absolutely.
Well, I guess this video won't do very well then.
We will see. But I think it's important still to address these things. And I think it can be interesting to a lot of people that might have Japan in mind.
Yeah, I think to enjoy a shorter term stay, possibly as a nomad in Japan, you need to be prepared. It's not one of those places where you spontaneously pack
You have to
a suitcase and
have
leave.
to make your homework.
You have to do your homework. You have to learn some phrases. You have to understand the cash-based society principles. You have to understand how the buses work, the bicycles, the gyms, the signing of things using the seal. You've got to be prepared. You know, if you're thinking about doing it, make a checklist, do the research. Don't just pack a bag and go.
Yeah, it entirely depends on what type of person you are. If it's easy for you to adjust to a new environment, I guess it's a different story, right? If you feel comfortable changing yourself to live in a place, to really immerse yourself in the culture, then maybe Japan is the right place for you. But for me personally, it just wasn't. I get it why people move there. If you're thinking of traveling to Japan right now, I believe it's a good time, just due to the weak yen. Everything is a lot more affordable. Don't misunderstand me, Japan is not a cheap place at all. But things are more affordable than they used to be, especially eating outside. Groceries, in at least some groceries, that's another story. Food is incredibly expensive in Japan. We just said that it's a difficult place to move to. Maybe people from Northeast Asia, South Koreans, for example, find it a lot easier. I don't know, because it's closer to the culture. I could imagine that. They might have trouble integrating into Europe, for example.
Yeah, that's a good one. If you're thinking about moving abroad, typically the further you move, the harder it might become to embed yourself culturally. Not entirely. I mean, me moving to Australia will probably be easier than me moving to Singapore or Japan. But there's something to be said about the distance in which you're moving from, like, where it is you live, and it's probably going to be harder for you.
Anyone is interested in traveling to Japan and has any questions, feel free to reach out to me either through the YouTube comments or directly on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is linked in the description of this video. Any questions, I'm happy to answer them.